Hello and welcome to the Important Conversations event series brought to you by the Johns Hopkins University Master of Liberal Arts Program and the AAP Committee on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Today's event features Shonali Burke discussing diversity and inclusion in public relations. My name is Peter Huggins and I'm the event producer. Please note today's program will be recorded and uploaded to the AAP YouTube channel under the Important Conversations playlist. During the program, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function and we'll answer as many questions as possible during the Q&A portion of the event. With that, I will turn over the event to the host of our program, Dr. Tristan Cabello.
Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Tristan Cabello. I'm the Associate Director for the Master of Liberal Arts at Johns Hopkins University. And I'm also the co-chair of our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee at Advanced Academic Program. And so the role of the committee is really to make sure that AAP and all of its programs are as diverse, equitable, and inclusive as they can be. And this year, the committee has decided to launch a speaker series that we have entitled Important Conversations. The goal of the series is to showcase the work that our faculty, our staff is doing in the field of diversity and inclusion, whether it's related to their professional careers, their teaching, or their research. So this year we've been having conversation about race, gender, sexuality, class, but also about equity and accessibility in the workplace. Today, we're doing something a little bit different. Since the title of the series is Important Conversations, we thought that it was right to have actual conversations with our guests. And so instead of asking our guests to give a presentation, as we usually do, today we are sitting down with one of our faculty members, and we are going to discuss their involvement in diversity and inclusion in their field of study, so you can get to know your professors on a more personal level. Today, it's my pleasure to welcome to Important Conversation, Shonali Burke. Shonali teaches in the communications program here at Johns Hopkins University, and she's also an accomplished public relations professional who has done a lot of work in the field of social justice, diversity, and inclusion. Shonali, welcome to Important Conversations, and welcome back to Johns Hopkins as well.
Thank you so much, Tristan. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Before we start, I just wanted to say, Shonali and I are going to talk to each other for maybe 25, 30 minutes. And there will be a possibility for you to ask questions at the end of the conversation. You can already start asking your question in the chat box here, on Zoom. Shonali, my first question to you is very simple. Can you tell us more about yourself? Can you introduce yourself? Tell us more about your background, your studies.
Absolutely. And my apologies again for interrupting you when you hadn't finished your introduction. I have a pretty eclectic background. And hi, Deneen. Thank you for dropping in the chat. It's lovely to see you here. I have a pretty eclectic background. So my bachelor's degree was in economics. Then I went to do a master's in theater. And so, of course, I ended up with a career in PR and marketing, which is actually my second career. I started out actually as a working actress and director in India, which is where I'm originally from. And it was only after moving to the US that I decided to pursue PR as my field, because I had some experience of that with events in India. So since my time in the US now, which I moved here in April of 2000, I started out in PR, like I said, working at small agencies, then large agencies, run my own business for many years, worked at the ASPCA for quite a while, really at a time when social media was nowhere near what it is today. And I am proud that I was part of the organization at a time when social was, we really helped to create some innovations, particularly in the field of measurement of public relations, because analytics.
ASPCA, can you tell us ASPCA, what does that stand for?
Yes, the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, out of New York. And because I'd always been interested in outcomes, how do we know we're achieving what we say we're setting out to achieve, particularly in PR, as you know, that can be a bit of a bugbear to a lot of practitioners and organizations. That really became, that fascinated me from the get-go. And so I ended up doing a lot of work and exploring how to make our PR programs and campaigns more measurable and really look at them more from an outcome point of view, while not losing the storytelling and the relationship piece of it. As I got more involved in social media, which was around the same time that I started teaching at Hopkins, I became fascinated by the power of social technologies to connect people, and also the measurability of the digital space. And so that started to inform my work, which was always very research-based. And so I developed this area that started to be known as social PR, which is not about just adding social media as another layer over a PR program, but really about socializing the conversation, using research to identify, cultivate, and motivate communities of influence who can not just power your story, but socialize it to help bring your brand and help support you as you move towards your measurable outcomes. So a lot of what I started to do in PR was often looked at as, well, that's more marketing, but why shouldn't we be more measurable? You know, because everybody should be working, I think, towards supporting business outcomes. And so that's really been the evolution of my career to date. And then, as you know, more recently, I moved into, after going back to school for business analytics, I moved into a marketing role with Arena Stage. And I'm you know, it's kind of my dream job because it brings my theater background along with my PR marketing experience together, and I just love it.
Yeah, I saw that on Twitter, and so congratulations on this job.
Thank you.
And there's something that I want to get back to here. You told us that you moved to the United States in 2000, which is right around the time where I moved to the United States too, and that you pursued a degree in the United States. And so first question I have for you is that we have so many international students here at AAP, and sometimes they're struggling navigating, you know, the differences between their home system and the system here in America. What advice do you have for them?
Well, you know, first, I do want to clarify that my master's was in India. And so, and the program that I went back to, that was just, as you know, the last couple of years. But I relate very much to the feeling of being, let's face it, an alien, excuse me. As I was telling Alexandra, I've had 3 cups of coffee today, so I need some water. But I do absolutely know the feeling of completely being out of your comfort zone and having to find your feet in a place that is completely new to you, in a culture that is completely new to you, because I had never been in the United States before. So first, I want to applaud everybody who does that, because I think that takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of determination to do that. And it's scary, you know, the unknown is frightening. From what I know of my association with Hopkins over all these years, there are a lot of resources that are provided to students, whether they are domestic or international. And I sometimes wonder if students really are aware of the range of services and support that's offered to them. So I would say, you know, the first thing anyone should do is really reach out to your advisor. I need help with this, or, you know, I'm at a loss to do XYZ. Can you give me some pointers? That's what I always advise my students to do. And certainly I've had students reach out to me saying, you know, I really need help with XYZ. And if I don't know the answer, then I will ask my program chair, or I'll say, hey, I think you need to talk to the office about this, or, you know, go to, you know, FaceApp or whatever it is. So I think go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, there are so many resources I think that Hopkins offers, and I imagine most universities have similar programs. And of course, I'm, you know, biased because I'm at Hopkins. So I would say start there. The other thing I think is you really want to try and find your communities that you can join. So whether those are interest groups, based on your academic focus or personal interests. I think Hopkins offers a lot of forums for exploration of that, but also whether it's through your local community or your maybe, meetup groups and so on. There are a lot of avenues to find people or kindred souls, people who might be having the same experience as you, to help you feel more accustomed. And I think I'm getting a message saying that my camera is a little blurry. Is that correct?
Yeah, the message here, is really to tell our international students that we know it's hard, that there are resources, and also that we value very much, what you bring to Hopkins and what you bring to the classroom. Your voices really matter. Your perspective on things, are different, and we value that. So thank you so much for sharing this, Shonali. And how did you get into PR? It seems that for you, PR is really connected to social justice, to culture. How did you get into that field in the first place? Was there like an aha moment at some point?
No, actually not. It was kind of a happy accident.
Okay. But sometimes it happens like this.
It really does. You can, I always say you can plan till the cows come home, but then where life takes you is a whole other world game. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how many more metaphors I could mix, but I will do my best for the rest of this conversation. So as I said, my first career was in the theater. I was a working actress and director. And when I moved to the US, I was really tired. I still loved the performing arts and theater, but I was physically and emotionally just exhausted, and I needed to do something else. So I explored a few different career options, including being a paralegal. And I remember doing a telephone conversation. This is back in the day when, before cell phones were ubiquitous, when really people still had landlines. And I remember doing a screener interview, I think, with a law firm in the Bay Area, because that's where I lived at the time. And after about 10 or 15 minutes of talking, the lovely person on the other end of the phone, she said, please don't apply for this job because you will get it and you will be bored out of your life. You are too creative for this. So I was like, okay.
That was straightforward.
Yeah. And, she saved a lot of heartache. Because I'm fascinated by legal things. I'm fascinated by logic and reasoning and, pros and cons and all of that. And so I thought, okay, well, I've decided that I'm not going to pursue theater, at least for now. I'm not going to go into the legal field, certainly as a paralegal, and I didn't really want to start, the whole law school process either. So I decided that I would look for a job in PR. And through my late husband, my husband passed away 4 years ago. Through his family, actually, I made a connection with someone who was a PR director at a hotel in San Francisco, who helped me get started networking, and that's how I landed my first job.
Very good. So as I mentioned, it seems that there is a strong emphasis on social justice, on cultural affairs in everything that you do. And you founded I believe it's a consulting firm that's called the Social PR Virtuoso. Can you tell us more about this? Yeah,
absolutely. So it's actually not a firm, it's a course, it's an online course. So as I said, but it is called the Social PR Virtuoso. And as I said, when I started working in when social media started to show up, first I was like, I don't know why anybody needs to know what I had for lunch. Like, really, that's what Twitter is about. I didn't get it.
Yeah, I remember feeling that way too, but
exactly. And it was really late in 2008 that I had recently left the ASPCA. I hadn't yet started teaching at Hopkins. That was January of 2009. And I had my first consulting client. So I was actually working on a social media audit for a media intelligence company. And I I started to get more comfortable with Facebook and so on. And one of my friends from India messaged me on Facebook to say, oh my God, I just got out of such and such, and there's been this horrible bomb blast at the train station. And it's just like, it's panic, it's chaos over here. And I was like, whoa. And because I'm, from the industry, I still have a lot of family and friends in India, as well as a lot of folk in the industry, I was really scared. So I started trying to find information, and I had gotten somewhat comfortable with Twitter by then. And I started asking questions on Twitter. And just through that process of asking questions and trying to find information and share information, I just started to connect with people. Over the course of those few days, it was like 3.5 days, I want to say 3 to 4 days, I was glued to my screen, literally. The only news, there was no major international network in India at the time covering this. So news only started filtering out to the quote unquote rest of the world, maybe even 2 days later, I want to say. So the only way people were learning anything was through social. And that's when the power of social to connect people and share information and do good really just hit me. So that started to really inform my work. And I really started to look at how do we leverage social media to not just integrate social techniques and social platforms and kind of layer it over a typical PR campaign. So not just use it as a one-way mode of communication, but people can actually talk to us. We can talk to them. We can talk together and make things happen. How do we do that? And so I wanted to be very clear that this was not just an add-on to public relations, but it was its own discipline. And so I started to call it social PR. What I realized as I worked, and I worked with agencies like the UN Refugee Agency, Oxfam America, Japan's Iwate Prefecture, the UN Foundation, where we kind of integrated social in this way to activate the power of conversation, to activate the power of community. My students at Hopkins and professionals in the field, I'd be speaking at conferences and events and so on, would come to me and say, well, how do you do this? Or how do you do that? And I was like, wow, these are really smart people. They're studying in programs like, AAP. If they're not finding the answers in these really rigorous professional and other settings, maybe I can put something together that will not just help them, but be an efficient way of doing it. So I thought about that for a while, and then I stumbled upon my first business coach who had launched her own e-commerce business in, informational products, as it's called, on the side, and she was really ramping them up, and she'd kind of bootstrapped her way up. And I was like, wow, she was a Pakistani woman working out of Saudi Arabia. And I was like, if a Pakistani woman who's an accountant, who's working out of Saudi Arabia, can create this little e-commerce empire, there's got to be a way I can do it. So that's how I started. And I created this course called the Social PR Virtuoso Master Course. And I am proud of it. And it's helped a lot of people, in fact, including, I think, some people on this webinar today, because it really takes you through what I call the A to Z of social PR. So what does that mean? How do you research, build, and implement a truly integrated, measurable social PR campaign from, what I call the 7 C's of social PR, which go all the way from conversation to content to community to calibration, which is my C for measurement. And how do you connect it back to business outcomes? How do you use that to improve and further your organization's mission while also helping your stakeholders at the same time?
And it seems that your work is really grounded in this concept that you call digital ethics. Can you talk a little bit more about this?
Yeah, I think if we don't have ethics, we don't have anything. Ultimately, at the end of the day, businesses can put the best numbers forward. They can put the most fancy programs forward. They can come up with, all sorts of snazzy options for their customers and their stakeholders. But if there's no trust between them, your stakeholders are just not going to do business with you. Your customers are just not going to do business with you. And trust, the foundation of trust, in my opinion, is ethics. I mean, that's why the Public Relations Society of America, that's why IABC, that's why all professional associations will have a code of ethics that we have to agree to abide by in our work. And so if we don't have ethics, we don't have anything. And I think it's so interesting because once you start to talk about ethics, then you have to think about, what is moral and what is ethical, what is personal, what is organizational. One of the courses, I think, as you know, Tristan, I teach at Hopkins, which I redeveloped relatively recently, is organizational communication. And I have a whole module on ethics over there. What is the organization's duty to its stakeholders, not just from a bottom line point of view, but from an ethical point of view? And I think it's the gold standard of crisis communications. And honestly, I think ethical communications is how Johnson & Johnson handled the Tylenol crisis in the 80s. Because the chairman at the time said, we're going to do the right thing here. It doesn't matter how much money this is going to cost us. We need to keep people safe. And if you put your stakeholders first, if you put their interests first, the rest will follow. And that to me is really what ethics is about, understanding what the right thing to do is and doing that.
Yeah. And so I'm guessing also that, of course, diversity and inclusion plays a huge role in that. Can you talk a little bit more about your personal philosophy on diversity and inclusion as it relates to your professional career? How do you include, how do you make sure that you're as inclusive as you can be in all the campaigns that you design and the work that you design?
For me, truthfully, for me, it's not how do I do that. It wouldn't occur to me to not do it.
Okay.
And perhaps part of that is personal for me because I come from a country and a culture that is diverse. It is, hundreds of ethnicities and languages. So growing up, it was never a question of how do we bring someone in? It was, well, of course this is just how it is. So it was never a question for me. So I would like to think that that's just baked into my work and into how I approach my work.
Embedded into who you are. Mm-hmm.
I hope so, and I think so. And my students will tell you if that's true or not, because they know me very well. I truly believe that it's really important to ask questions. If we're saying, okay, this is who we are, we kind of, lay out on a foundational level, this is who we are, this is what we're trying to achieve. How do we make sure everybody has a voice? Because that's what's really important. That's what inclusion is about. Does everyone have a voice? And equity is really about, there's that famous Verna Myers quote about, I'm not going to paraphrase it because I'll mangle it, but it's about not just being invited to the dance, but getting to the dance. Or it's not just about being invited to the dance, but getting asked to dance or something like that. I'm completely mangling it, so I won't, I apologize in advance, but everybody go look it up. And it's in my course, so people who've taken my organizational communication course, it's in there. And so equity for me is really about access. So first of all, are you talking? Are you listening? Are you asking the questions? Are you making sure everyone is getting asked the question? Are you making sure everybody has an equal opportunity to respond? And then what are you doing with that information? How are you crystallizing it and applying it in your work to make sure you are serving every community, not just some communities? And I think, and that's where the accessibility piece becomes so important, particularly in the realm of equity, because you can have quote unquote diversity, but if everybody's not being asked the same question, if only some people are being asked in that quote unquote diverse pool, then it's not equitable. And it's not really inclusive, in my opinion.
You have received a lot of awards. And so you've been named the first Indian, I've listed them all on my little note here. First Indian American to be named PR Week Top 40 Under 40 list in US-based PR professionals. You were featured also in the TEDx Adams Morgan Women in December 2012. You were named the 2015 recipient of the Matrix Award by the Washington, D.C. chapter of the Association of Women in Communication. My question to you is, although you're very accomplished and you're very successful in what you do, have you experienced in your professional career, in your studies as a person, any type of macroaggression in at work, in your career as a woman, as an Indian American? And what is your best advice to give to students who might be experiencing or dealing with the same thing? Macroaggression or discrimination?
Oh, sure. All the time.
Yeah, of course.
All the time.
Yeah.
It's, it could be something as veiled as, and I still get it sometimes. It could be something as supposedly innocuous as, you speak really good English. Where did you learn to speak English? To which I learned to respond, at school. Where did you learn to speak English? Or it could be, questions about, do they have cars in India? Or, things like that. And that was a long time ago in my career. A lot of times it is, so, I could go on, but a lot of times I didn't realize it until after the fact because I wasn't expecting it. And I think often if we look for things, we see them, but I did not walk into situations expecting to be targeted or discriminated against. So even if it was happening, I didn't necessarily notice it at the time, which actually helped me a ton. Because had I noticed it then and there, I would have been so hurt that I don't know that I would have known how to deal with it.
And so what do you mean when you say like you did not notice? Like what does that mean exactly? Like you were not aware
that I would just take it as, okay, it's a question and I'd respond.
Oh, okay.
So I just, it wouldn't occur to me that the question was coming from a place of microaggression. I would just take it at face value. And I would either answer it or be like,
yeah, as it was just, a question. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Which is actually a really good way to deflect it, as I learned.
And so how much do you think that the fact that you indeed came from India, and that you had this background, also is partly responsible for the way you approach this? I mean, you just thought that was a question. That was not, really discrimination. I mean, people wanted to learn, maybe, I don't know. And so, yeah. No, I see what you're saying.
And it's kind of like, if you don't, and so this would be the tip that I would give to anyone experiencing that. First of all, breathe. I've learned to do that. Just kind of take a breath and pause and just kind of listen, because there's no law that says you have to respond immediately. There's also no rule that says you have to respond at all, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So if we don't buy in to whatever the basically trigger is, the person who's on the other end kind of goes, oh, well, that didn't work. So they might not try it, or they might give up after a few times. And I've learned to kind of, and I don't do it well all the time, but sometimes I practice it well, to really, like I said, kind of take a breath and kind of listen and maybe come up with, questions like, perhaps. Or, do you think it's blah, blah, blah? Perhaps, which is true, right?
It's a good tip, and it's a good way to to deal with it, actually.
And you know what a really good one is? Let me tell you one more though. A really
sure.
good one is if someone asks a question that's really passive aggressive or trying to poke at you in a passive aggressive way, you could go, interesting question. Why do you ask?
Yeah, and you usually do not get an answer, but
and you may go, I really need to get to Metro right now.
Yeah. Shonali, we have a ton of questions already arriving in the chat box, and so I just want to also ask you one final question here. It seems that you recently went back to school to Harvard as an adult student, as what we call, in higher education, maybe a non-traditional student. And as you know, this is also the population that we serve here at AAP. What was your experience? What advice do you have also for our students?
Oh boy, my experience, you said I went back to Harvard. So it is intimidating. Yeah. It is wild. It's been described, my program, the Harvard Business Analytics program, has been aptly described, in my opinion, like an MBA on steroids, because it's not an MBA, but there's a lot of business in it. Obviously, there's a lot of analytics. I had to learn. I hadn't done computer programming since I was, a kid. Let me tell you, learning Python and SQL when you don't come from a computer science background is not fun, which now I really enjoy, and I haven't practiced it in a while, but I know how to do it. And the entire idea is to equip business leaders with the language of data and equip data scientists with an understanding of business so that you can really work together to interpret each other and move your business forward. And I loved it. I mean, I tore my hair out many times, don't get me wrong, and they're probably laughing if anybody watches this. And Alexandra, you should tag the Harvard Business Analytics program on LinkedIn if you share this, if you don't mind my suggesting it, because then it'll show up in their feed. And I am, as you know, a student ambassador for the program, which I'm proud to be. I feel like I went to school, or am associated with, the two best H's in academia, Hopkins and Harvard, and I'm really grateful and proud of each of those affiliations. And, first I'd say, I know your pain to students. I feel your pain. So when I or another professor were really tough on you, we know what it's like because I've been through it. But I will also tell you that when professors push you, it's because they know what you can do. And they're not doing it to make your life difficult, because you came here, you made a choice to apply to one of the best schools and programs, not just in the country, but in my opinion, in the world. You got in, which it means you are pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Which means you can do this.
Yeah, and that's what I repeat to my students all the time too. I mean, of course, you got in, that means that you're pretty awesome and that you got this. Okay. Yeah. So we have a lot of questions for you, Shonali, and I just want to get through most of them if we can. First question here, what would you say to organizations, institutions that are worried about and paralyzed by how to make their DEI work pursuit of DEI authentic?
I guess, and could you repeat the name to me, Tristan, of who's asking? Just so I can
it's Dinian or Dinian?
Deneen, yeah, Deneen. I thought that was you because I saw the question come through. So Deneen and I go way back, just so you know, and she's one of my faves. I guess the question to me would be, why do they think it's inauthentic? I think that's where you need to start. The question was, how would you? The question, if I understand it correctly, the question was, what would you say to organizations who are afraid that their work in DEI might be inauthentic?
Yeah, or if there's a history of racism in the organization, Dinian says.
So there's a history of race. Ooh, well, that's horrible. First of all, they've got to address it head on, right? They've got to investigate why, what, and be honest about it. If we're talking about ethics, you've got to own up to it. But I think you also have to say, okay, what are we then going to do? I don't think you can acknowledge it, but then I think you also have to say, and here is what we are going to do now. Even if you don't have the full-on plan, here's the next step we're taking. This is when, and then we're going to do this. You know, I think you've got to let people know what actions will take place, because words are just words. Great question, Dylan.
We have another question here from Obiora. So you have an international background that gives you access to a global view. How does that translate to works you do local and international, giving the competing ethics of these different regions?
Interesting question. Well, my work now, at least, I don't know that I've ever worked internationally in the giving space. So if you mean donations, even though I've worked with international organizations, most of the time the focus has been in the US. So I do not have a good answer for you there. The only time I can think of was when I worked with the UN Refugee Agency and we worked on the Blue Key campaign, which was again really focused within the US. From what I remember, there were other chapters around the world, some of whom were like, hey, we want to replicate this model, you know, in our country. And we were like, great. But we stayed out of non-US work. So I can't really speak to that. And
we have another question here on international PR events, you know, that may be related to the other one. In international PR events, especially in social media content, one kind of methods for audience guidance may not always be suitable for different audiences. So how do we coordinate?
Yeah, that is a great question. And it does tie back to the other one. So I also just want to go back to the first question, the first part of the question, which was how does my background translate to local work? Was that correct?
Yeah.
I don't know why it wouldn't. I mean, that's one of the questions I'd say, why do you ask?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I've worked in the US more than 20 years now. So, you know, I think it's a question of understanding the culture, understanding how to phrase questions, understanding what information you're trying to, what information you're trying to get to then communicate. What is the message? What are the messages we need our audiences to hear and how and to absorb and then to act on, and what is the best way to communicate that? I don't think it makes a difference whether one comes from India or Brazil or China or the United States, if one understands the principles of communication. I mean, if that were the case, then we wouldn't have international students, right? Absolutely. Or we wouldn't go to other places to study or to work. I just wanted to get back. And then the second part was kind of translating and figuring out international PR events.
Yeah.
You know, I think you kind of have to understand the cultural sensitivity of the communities or the areas with which you're coordinating, and really understand that. So, for example, if, you know, a Twitter chats or tweetathons may work very well in the US or with certain demographics, that may not translate in a different culture. And then you have to really think about, well, what is a social platform that really works over there? And then how do we take this program and modify it and work with your counterparts to make it successful?
Very good. Another question, one final question here, Shonali, from Susanna, who seems to be one of your students and who loved your course. You have such a rich and diverse professional background, which translates into your teaching. Susanna loved your nonprofit communication class. Any tips for communication students who want to get into teaching down the road, or adjunct teaching down the road?
Thank you, Susanna. And it's great to see you here. And I love teaching that class. You know, it's one of my favorites. I mean, they're all my favorites, but that was the first class I started teaching at Hopkins. So it's very special to me. I would say,
if I'm, I think that you've always done that, right, in your career. You've always done your professional career, and you've always taught on the side, right?
Yeah.
This is something that you've done concurrently. Okay.
Yeah. I come from a family of teachers. You know, my mother was a teacher, my grandmother was a teacher, my father's family were teachers. So I think it's just an, you know, again, baked into the DNA. I would pursue, I think different universities have different guidelines around how you can apply for adjunct positions. And if it interests you, and this is a question I get quite a lot from my students who are interested in, you know, moving into an adjunct role, talk to your peers, talk to professors. I like some of you talk to me and say, hey, how do I break into this? Identify the area in which you want to teach and look at your peers who have already started adjuncting. Because then between all of these different areas, we could say, okay, if you really want to teach, you know, you may have come through our program, but maybe you really want to focus on digital ethics. You know, maybe you should look at XYZ university or XYZ program, and then who could we connect you with? Or how would you go about it? So I would say really, I think be clear about what you want to teach and also be clear about why. Because if you're looking at it as a way to test a future career in academia, I think that's wonderful. If you're looking at it as just something to feed your soul, I think that is wonderful as well. But just as I would advise anyone to manage their expectations with their professional endeavors, I would say make sure you are very clear about why you want to teach. And make no mistakes, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. And my students who are on here will tell you this also, that I put a lot of effort, as I know, Tristan, all of our professors do, into our courses. You know, I'll do video calls, which I know are not mandatory, but I enjoy that because I want my students to have the feeling of seeing each other. Grading, you know, course prep, advising students. There's a lot of time that goes in. So it's not for, if you're juggling 2 jobs or 3 jobs, it may not be the right time for you. So be practical about it as well.
And I can also actually echo what you're saying. I mean, and tell Susanna, you know, the first step probably, the first stop here probably is to talk to their advisor, to their professors, and see how they can accomplish that. And of course, different schools have different requirements. But with a master's degree, you know, from Johns Hopkins University, and with, you know, a professional career in communications, you're probably very well suited to teach in a communication program. So that's a totally viable career here. Shonali, we've seen like many students who said during this little event that they love your courses, and I can totally understand why, because your energy when you talk about your career, when you talk about PR, is really great. It's infectious, and so I totally understand, you know, why your students really love your courses, and it's been a pleasure to spend the last 40 minutes with you. So thank you so much for joining us. It was really great to have you, and we hope to do, you know, more events with you in the future. And I just want to tell, want to say something?
Oh no, I'm just, thank you so much. This has been so much fun and absolute pleasure. I will come back anytime.
Okay. It's been our pleasure. Thank you so much. And so I just want to tell the audience that we have a series of important conversations this semester. And our next one is scheduled on March the 10th. And we will have Professor Chari White, who will give a talk entitled "The South is a Sick Place." And her research explores the connections between historical disempowerment, racial violence, and anti-Black rhetoric in America, and Black environmental participation. So we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a good evening and see you next time. Bye.